Hi, welcome to this lecture on environmental adaptation for animals. On this last video on energetics of aerobic activity, we will discuss on maximum speed of respiration. So far, we have learned that, depending on the way of travel and the speed of travel and your body mass, they all affects on the energy consumption. And whether you are flying or running or swimming, there is always a maximum speed that you can do with your aerobic metabolism. So this maximum rate of oxygen consumption gives you the peak of aerobic catabolism. If you try to go faster, then you are relying on the glycolysis, and you can do it only for a short time. That's why the animals with a high maximum rate of oxygen consumption, they can cover long distance faster because they are now able to produce ATP with pay-as-you-go mode. So with aerobic catabolism. And it also determines how long some exercises can be made. Because we humans, we hardly ever make anything with maximum rate of oxygen consumption, even when we are jogging. We can have mild exercises to use 35% of the maximum oxygen consumption for 8 hours. But even when it's 75% of this maximum, we can do it only for 1 or 2 hours. And it's quite important because then if your maximum rate of oxygen consumption is modified when you are getting older, it's reduced. And that means that you are closer this maximum during the same kind of physical activities that you were used to do when you were young. But now you get tired and you can continue on this short period. We have two ways to compare the maximum rate of oxygen consumption. Well, first of all, we have the thumb rule. So in mammals, it's usually 10-fold increase in the oxygen consumption during the maximum aerobic exercises, and this is a ratio. So it depends on our resting level metabolism. And it's called aerobic excitability. And it's good weight because it's depending on the size of the animal, depending on the way to travel, either we are swimming or flying or running. So it's we can compare different size of animals and different ways to travel, etc. And then the other way is to have the aerobic scope of activity. So we can just subtract the resting rate oxygen consumption from this maximum. And that gives us some kind of idea that, how much we can increase the ATP production aerobically. First of all, we can compare different kind of animal groups like ectotherm and endotherm. Over here we have two comparisons. Animals that weigh about 200 grams, animals that weigh 800 grams. Rat and salmon, they are about the same size, but the rat standard rate oxygen consumption is about 10 times more than salmon. And in guinea pig or lizard, again, about 10 times more. And even when these athletic ectotherms are using oxygen as fast as they can, they are in the same scale than in endotherms when these endotherms are in rest. So that's why we endotherms, we waste a lot of energy. But the good thing that we can do it is that, when we are increasing 5-fold like the rat or 10-fold, then we can produce a lot of energy. And that makes it possible to travel fast in long distance. So that's why migrating animals are endotherms. And what about then? We can compare also in phylogenetic groups. to see, because it depends on the body weight, so it's an allometric function. So small animals have higher maximum oxygen consumption, as well as they have higher resting level oxygen consumption. And usually animals are near some kind of line, but some animals are not. So the maximum oxygen consumption vary a lot. So some animals are using much more oxygen than they should be. And one of these is American pronghorn. It has about 4 times higher maximum oxygen consumption rate, for which it can run 65 kilometers per hour for a long time. It's not the fastest animal or fastest mammal on the earth, but it might be the fastest long distance runner. And how it does it, it has 50% more muscle than other animals, and it has 2 times more mitochondria per gram of muscle. And pretty much the same is happening in the bat. So the bats are also having a lot of mitochondria to have more capacity to produce ATP with oxidative catabolism. But it also affects on humans. So we humans, we have a variation in this maximum rate of oxygen consumption, and it's caused 50% by life experiences, meaning training, and 50% by genetics. And it affects quite drastically that whether we like some sport or not. Because if some sport is very highly oxygen demanding, we don't like this sport, or we can't be the best in the world because we can't supply enough oxygen for running as fast as we would like. And it's been tested in Swedish population of world-class athletes, and these athletes, they have about 2 times higher maximum oxygen consumption than general population. But it also depends a lot of different kind of sport or events. So those sportsmen or women that have cross-country skiing or long-distance running, they have a huge maximum oxygen consumption versus humans that are good in gymnastics or weightlifting. So something that happens, you need power for a short period. For example, weightlifting, you can do it with creatine phosphate. So you don't have to have so huge capacity for increasing the oxidative catabolism. But it also can be changed with endurance training. So aerobic and usually changing and having different intervals, it can increase oxygen consumption 10% or 30%. But it doesn't work for everybody. And how it works, it's not only increase the maximum oxygen consumption, but also increase the number of mitochondria. And it upregulates the enzymes like citrate synthase or cytochrome oxidase, and they are in the citrate cycle and the electron transfer chain. So now your mitochondria are better. You have more mitochondria and they are better in producing ATP. But there are also some system level changes. So the heart capacity to pump blood is increased. There are more capillaries in the muscle, and there's more glucose transporters in the muscle cells. So you can get more oxygen in the cells, you can get more glucose in the cells, and that's why you can produce more ATP with your increased number of mitochondria. But there also can be that these changes are affected on the next generations. So there might be some epigenetics. It was a one study where they had randomly selected rats to have two populations, and on one of them there was a endurance running to increase the maximum oxygen capacity, but it's also affected on their offspring. And after 10 generations, the population with endurance running, they were able to run 5 times longer, and they had 50% higher maximum oxygen capacity. So we can affect on these, and most probably in the wild populations, this is quite much saying that, okay, these populations where they have higher maximum rate of oxygen consumption, they are very much better, for example, to migrate or do any kind of physically demanding activity. Another way to compare is this average daily metabolic rate, because it gives a quite nice number to estimate the energy needs. Because in the early literature, it was very difficult to find that, okay, endothermy, they have warm blood and warm body temperature. That's why they most probably they need more energy. But how much? Well, we can compare by estimating the average daily metabolic rates, and to see that, okay, it's a 10-fold increase. But also with these kind of experiments, it's been shown that the normal daily life of mammals and birds consumes 2 times or 3 times more energy than the basal metabolic rate. So when you are nursing litters or pups or young, the aerobic expansibility, so the ratio of the oxygen consumption versus in the basal metabolic rate oxygen consumption can be even 6 or 7 times more. And as well as in the mice, when they are in very cold temperatures, they can increase their metabolic rate by the 4-fold or 6-fold. But in humans, we are very bored in this. In humans, whatever we are doing, it's quite often we are quite near the basal metabolic rate. Well, we are doing, that's why some office work. But even when we are doing physical exercises, the aerobic expansibility is about 2.5. So it means that, okay, we can increase 250% of our basal metabolic rate. And that's why the bird migration is more demanding than any human sport. So in flying in a wind tunnel or in some birds that are migrating over the Pacific Ocean, they can increase their aerobic metabolism 10 times more than in the basal metabolic rate. Whereas in the athletics, in Tour de France, that is the most demanding in this aerobic ATP production, we have seen that in some humans they can increase 4 times or maybe 5 times. So the human sport is much easier than bird migration. And how do we do it? Well, first of all, the bird migration has been expanded quite nicely after finding these satellite techniques to reveal actually their long-lasting migrations, where they are traveling. For example, this western osprey, it travels about 7,000 kilometers from Scandinavia to Ivory Coast. And the migration is based largely on the fat metabolism. We already know that, the easiest way to store as much energy as possible is to use fat. But the problem is that fat is difficult to consume. You need oxygen all the time, and then it's difficult to transport also in a large amount of fat in the circulation. So what the birds are doing, they have in the intestine, it's used as a fat store. So that's why in the very first lecture we had these migrating birds that had drastic changes in their intestine. So they can increase the intestine by adding some fat when they are eating. And then when they are traveling, they are using these fat stores, and that's why decreasing the size of the intestine. But also there's a transportation method in the birds, in water-soluble lipoproteins that they are using to give so to make it easier to transport the lipid from one place to another in the circulation. Thank you.